Sure, good.
Good?
Very
okay.
Good. Very good.
So I heard that it's about IT, right? It's about your class is about IT and how it can drive innovation. So what I'm going to talk today about, and I'm actually, maybe it's hard. Maybe it's better if you don't interrupt me. We will do questions later, hey, because of the format. So it's specifically about sustainability, environmental sustainability of tourism, and how we can entice tourists to behave more sustainably. And in the second half of the lecture, it will be specifically about how information technology is critically important if we want to achieve that at scale, both for the development of new things and for the implementation. So it'll be a little bit of IT, a little bit of sustainability, a lot of tourism. Yes, thanks for the introduction. My name's Sara Dolnicar. I work here in Brisbane at the University of Queensland. And I also lead a group, a small research group called the Low Harm Hedonism Initiative. And so what we do is, our main aim is to develop behavior change interventions, to develop practical measures that trigger pro-environmental behavior in consumers. And as you will see today, what's really, really important to us is that we can prove the change in behavior with real behavior, as opposed to surveys, right? I'm not a big believer in surveys when it comes to measuring behavior. All right, let's get started. Just a bit of context. Now, this is obviously not new to you, but there's a few quotes that I want to share with you, both actually from Antonio Guterres. One is, "We're sleepwalking into climate catastrophe." I think that's a really good quote, because it really feels like we're kind of all aware of climate change, but not enough to change something. So we just keep doing what we're doing. And the way I for myself, it's easiest to contextualize climate change is if I look at one of those charts, and you know they're on social media, they're everywhere, the charts, they show the temperature change over the years. But it's a very abstract chart, isn't it? Like, it's not a scary chart. So what makes it scary for me is if I plot a few important dates in my life. So this is when my mother was born. This is when I was born. And if you look at here at the temperature patterns, these are relatively similar temperature patterns, right? So my mom, when she raised me to live in the same world that I'm living in. Well, this is when my kids were born. And that really scares me, all right? Because not only am I supposed to raise my children for a world I don't understand, but this graph's getting worse, right? So when my kids are 50, what's their world going to be like? So this is a real problem. It's not just a fun academic conversation, and it requires really quick action. And it does require action, because here's my second favorite quote: "We're on a highway to climate hell with the foot still on the accelerator." And tourism most certainly has its foot still on the accelerator. We're generating a huge amount of environmental impact. I'll tell you about that in a sec. This, I'm sure you all know, because you would have learned that in your studies. Tourism is important, right? So we can't just say tourism causes too much environmental damage, so we're going to stop it, right? Why can't we say that? Because it generates 10% of GDP, and it secures 1 in 10 jobs on the planet. That's a huge number of families and humans who depend on this industry. And I've already mentioned the environmental impact. Well, the environmental impact of tourism is actually quite disastrous. We don't naturally think of tourism as a dirty industry, but it's a very dirty industry. So it generates between 8 and 10% of all CO2 emissions. And worse than that, if you think about the foot still being on the accelerator, we are predicting that these CO2 emissions will increase, not decrease. They will increase by another 3% annually. So that's really talking about the foot still on the accelerator, right? It just keeps going up, keeps going up. But we're not only, we have other problems apart from carbon emissions. We are using a gigantic amount of water. So for one tourist staying in one hotel for one night, 300 liters of fresh water. Most critically, that's often in areas that are really struggling because they don't even have enough water for their local population. And we are filling the planet up with waste. So we generate 35 million tons of solid waste every single year. So there you go. That's kind of the context, and that's the starting point for my research group's work in this area. And the work we do is specifically changing behavior. And if you read the IPCC climate change report, it's all about changing behavior. So if we are able to change behavior, we could reduce greenhouse gas emissions by up to 70%. But of course, changing behavior is a lot easier said than done. But still, that's what we try to do. And then the next question is, whose behavior do we want to change? But this is a great, actually, conversation topic for university students, because if I had my choice, the behavior I would change would be the behavior of governments. Yeah, a lot of the things you would hear today, it would be quite easy for governments to say, I'm just regulating that. It shouldn't be up to behavioral scientists like me to try to nudge tourists to make behavioral changes. Governments could just walk in and say, we're not having it. In fact, California and Shanghai, in both those places, the government said, we are prohibiting the little shampoo and conditioner bottles, right? So that just goes to show, if policymakers have the will, they can quite easily put these things in place, and they can achieve large-scale change real fast. So if I had a choice, my advice would be that governments should change. The reality is they don't, right? Why? They're elected, they don't want to upset businesses. So, very few legislators have put in place rules that help make the tourism industry more sustainable. Now, if we can't change the behavior of governments, the next best option is to change the behavior of the tourism industry. And you would have seen a lot of initiatives like certifications, pledges, all sorts of things. The reality, sadly, once again, is that it's very, very hard to change the behavior of industry. Yesterday, I went to a meeting, and there was an expert in the meeting on airlines. And of course, that obviously air travel is the biggest contributor to the CO2 emissions that tourism generates. And so that expert said, during all of COVID, when nobody was traveling, the planes were still flying. Why? Because they have specific landing and departure slots at airports. And if you don't use the slot, you lose it, right? So total madness. So even if the airline didn't want to fly, to protect their spot, they fly, right? So industry, they want to earn money. They have all sorts of weird incentive mechanisms like this. So I have found it exceptionally difficult to get any movement by industry or even by industry associations, because ultimately they want to make money. So then we have the poor old tourist, and it's the poor old tourist that my research group is focusing on. Yeah, just to reiterate, so if the government would do something, they could impose rules on the industry, and they could impose rules on the tourist. However, focusing on the tourist is not the worst case scenario, because the tourist can also push governments to create change. It's not easy, but it's possible. And the tourist can also force industry to make changes. So as we focus in our research on the tourists, we know it's kind of the little fish, right? It's kind of the lowest hanging fruit that we're trying to target. But we sure hope that kind of will radiate over to other stakeholders. All right, now what are we currently doing? I should put the theory in, but hopefully you're familiar with the mainstream theories. So two of the main theories that we're using in tourism when we try to understand sustainable behavior are the theory of planned behavior and value belief norm theory. Now, both those theories have one thing in common. They have people's attitudes standing at the very center of what they believe affects behavior, explains behavior, and therefore can be used to change behavior, right? So we're assuming we can give people information. That information is going to change people's attitudes, and that attitude change will change their behavior. So wherever you go on the planet, you're going to be welcomed with one of the signs you see here. Please help us save water. Please do this. Please do that. Do it for the environment, right? So all these appeals are assuming they're working off traditional theory, which, by the way, I think is not working at all in this context. Working off traditional theory, and they're targeting attitudes. Yeah, but I will show you later that targeting attitudes doesn't work particularly well. So we will have a few experiments where attitudes will work and others will fail. But importantly, attitudes are not the only pathway. There's a lot of other things we can do that are potentially much cheaper and much more effective than trying to constantly change attitudes. Oh, actually, while I think of it, why do the attitudes not work? Because think of yourself, when you go on holiday, the last thing you want is analyze a sign and read it and cognitively process it and then sit down and make a decision whether you're going to reuse your towels, right? So even in the best of cases, attitudes don't work well. But in tourism, it's particularly hopeless because the state of mind of a tourist is not prone to kind of extensive cognitive processing, all right? So what other ways are there? Oh, no, wait, we will first have a look at some of the evidence why it doesn't work. So this was a fabulous study my PhD student Logi conducted in Iceland. And he basically asked people, so he went to a ticket counter for boat tours. And tourists had the choice of two different boat tours. They were actually identical boat tours, but one of the boats was eco-certified and the other one was not eco-certified. So what Logi did is after people bought the ticket, he gave them a little survey, which worked well because they were in the waiting area, so they were bored anyway. And he asked them lots of questions. Among other things, he asked, when you were deciding which boat tour to take, did you consider the environment, right? Did your attitudes, your pro-environmental attitudes affect your choice as you decided which of the two? And 60% of our tourists in the waiting room said absolutely. Yeah, we absolutely consider the environment when we make bookings in general, but also for this specific tour. And then what Logi did was he hopped on the boat with the tourists, because once the boat is out of the port, there is no way for the tourists to know which of the boat was eco-certified or not. And then he asked them a simple question. Was this boat eco-certified or not? And you can see this gap. So 14% were able to accurately tell us whether or not the boat is eco-certified. Talk about an attitude behavior gap, right? So everyone loves the environment, right? If we ask about their pro-environmental attitudes, if we ask about their behavioral intentions, everyone's going to tell us, yep, that's a great thing. But when it comes down to action, that's not quite the case. So you see the gap here. If the truth would be the top number, you would have to go to every boat provider in the universe and say, you have got to get eco-certified. If, however, the truth is the bottom number, you'd have to go to every boat provider and say, don't waste your money on eco-certification. So a massive difference in intention and actual behavior. But it actually gets worse. So another PhD student of mine, Emil Juvan, said, well, let's have a look at the best case scenario. Let's say that we want to talk to people who have very high pro-environmental values. And then Emil and I had a long discussion because, of course, in tourism and in the social sciences more general, we like to do surveys. But we had the conversation and we said, well, actually, if we ask in a survey about their values, they're just going to lie to us again, right? So what he did instead is he said, all right, then I'm going to do interviews with actual environmental volunteers. So what we know about these people is that we didn't ask them about their environmental values, but we know that they have very strong pro-environmental values because they are donating their time in their home context regularly for environmental. They're putting their money where their mouth is, right? They're actually working towards pro-environmental action. So Emil's hypothesis is, well, if I go to the people with the highest pro-environmental values and still they don't do sustainable tourism, well, where's the hope in this? All right. So he went and interviewed environmental volunteers, and the results were truly fascinating. So first of all of these environmental volunteers were quite aware that tourism causes environmental harm. Yeah, nobody denied that. They were quite aware of it. When we asked them about what they do on vacation, a lot of the things they said were actually outright unsustainable. Yeah. And then here comes the most interesting bit. When we asked them, why do you behave like that when you know that these things are environmentally sustainable? Our volunteers did something that's very human. They came up with a whole lot of excuses, right? So what they had done, basically they have adjusted. You might have heard about cognitive dissonance theory. That's when our behavior and our attitudes are not aligned. So what these environmental volunteers do is they say, oh, I got caught out. Yes, I know that this is bad, but I still did it. So I'm going to give you a justification, right? To make it more tolerable for myself that I have a misalignment between beliefs and behaviors. So what are some of the excuses? They would tell us, oh, all these ecotourism offers are greenwash. It's not really more sustainable. I don't have time, it's hard enough to organize that trip. I can't go searching for information about which holiday is sustainable and which one is not. They're too expensive. I can't afford it, right? If I were to book a sustainable hotel as opposed to a non-sustainable, I just can't afford that price difference. Other industries are worse. That's a fun one, right? So they basically say, yeah, sure, tourism's not great, but I don't know, mining is much, much worse. Yeah. And even more amusingly, other tourists are worse. So they will say, yes, I understand that this harms the environment, but I am the best of a bad lot, right? Other tourists are much worse. And do I have one more? Oh, I've got no choice. So that's, by the way, my excuse, because my mother lives in Europe. So if I want to see her, I either need to fly across or she needs to fly across. So that's exactly what the environmental volunteers do. They said, look, I'd love not to fly, but there's all these reasons and I really have no option. So, I'm forced to behave environmentally unsustainable. All right, so that's kind of the whole story around beliefs and how people are extremely good in adjusting their beliefs to do what they want to do. And all of these things explain why giving them signs in hotel rooms is probably not good, and why, airlines asking them to pay for carbon offsets is probably not the best approach. Luckily, there are a lot of behaviors that we do not think about. So remember, the core hypothesis why messages don't work is because the information is meant to change attitudes in a cognitive process that we think about, and then the cognitive process leads to a behavior change. Now, we know that pathway doesn't work, but there is some pretty cool other pathways. So you would have all heard about nudging. What is nudging? Nudging is if we change something about our environment that automatically directs us to do the desired behavior. In our case, the sustainable behavior. Now, you will know who's written the books and who won the Nobel Prize for nudging, but you may not know where it started. And I think once you know where it started, you will never forget how it works. So it started in the men's toilet at Amsterdam airport. And the problem they had was not so much an environmental problem. It was a cleanliness problem. So the men's toilet was always filthy because the boys weren't very good at targeting. So now, if we would use the old theory, like value, belief, norm theory, theory of planned behavior, what would we do? We would create a message that we would put in eye height, and we would say to those gentlemen, look, if you miss the bowl, we have to clean more. If we have to clean more, we are using more water and more chemicals, which is bad for the environment, right? Luckily, that's not what they did. They did something much, much simpler. They drew a fly in the toilet bowl. Cleanliness problem solved immediately, right? And this is what nudging is about. So nudging does not limit people's freedom, right? Nobody told them to shoot the fly in the toilet bowl. It doesn't limit their freedom, but it changes something in the behavioral infrastructure that almost automatically, and certainly without thinking about it, leads to a behavioral change. So this is really the radical opposite of behavior change mechanisms that are using beliefs. So what other options there are? Here's a little summary. If our aim is to entice tourists to behave in more environmentally friendly ways, I argue, you could classify it in different ways, but in my worldview, there's kind of 4 things that you can do. You can try to change beliefs, and we already know that's not particularly successful. You can try to work with social norms. We haven't talked about that yet, but this is a lot more powerful than the beliefs alone. So social norm is when we use peer pressure. So, for example, I don't want to be seen to litter in a national park. So it's the fact that other people see me and that there's certain societal expectations about my behavior that cause behavior change. Yeah. The next one we haven't talked about, and that's, by the way, my absolute favorite, and you will see examples for all of this over the next hour, is increasing enjoyment. Now, I think that's the winner strategy in tourism. Why? Because tourism is all about enjoyment. Tourists want to enjoy themselves, right? They are on holiday to pursue pleasure, nothing much more. So if we can align the sustainable behavior with higher perceived enjoyment, that could be a winner strategy. And then the last approach is nudging. And we just discussed the nudging. We will have a few examples about that as well. Importantly, you can't always nudge, right? Because it's about changes in infrastructure. Some infrastructure can be changed, but not all infrastructure can be changed. So when nudging works, it's almost certainly going to be the most effective strategy. But my argument is that if nudging doesn't work, try to find a way to increase enjoyment, because within tourism, it's likely to be most successful. Now, I'm not going to talk you, because even in 1.5 hours, I don't want to bore you with all there were a few review articles, one review article and one meta-analysis recently, actually, that looked at how successful each one of those approaches is. And I just thought I'd share that with you, because those arrows are my personal view, right, of the effectiveness. So changing beliefs alone has a 58% success rate. Now, don't forget, when I say that, that's 58% of the published studies, the intervention worked. There will be a lot more unpublished studies that failed. Yeah, so at the best case, it's 58% success rate. Social norms is hard to say. That's why I say approximately 50, because a lot of the social norm is intertwined with beliefs. So it's hard to isolate exactly, but you will see that some of them work really, really well. So that's why my arrow is bigger for the social norm. Enjoyment, 100% success rate, but you need to keep in mind there's hardly any studies, right? So there's heaps of studies around beliefs. There's lots of studies about social norms. There's less than a handful of studies that look at enjoyment. And the same is true with nudging. Very small number of studies, but when the nudging was studied, it had an 82% success rate. So you can immediately see what's more or less promising. All right, now we move on to how do we go about developing and testing measures that can entice tourists to behave in more sustainable ways. So what we need is an experimental design. Now, I'm not sure how much you've talked about research design and methods in your program, but we need an experimental design, because an experimental design is the only research design that can draw causal conclusions. So if you look at this diagram here, the first white circle here is the pre-intervention status. So let's say I want people to shower for less long in a hotel room. So I first measure what is the average duration of a shower before I do anything about it, right? And then I can do something crazy, like this is my favorite one. I don't know if you see it, but I can put a timer there and I can say, well, why don't you use this timer? And that'll give you an idea. And I'm hoping that the timer will change the shower time. So the purple ball in the middle, sphere in the middle, is the intervention. So it's whatever we have designed in an attempt to change behavior. And then after we have lodged the intervention, we have to measure again what is the average water time. Yeah. So measure the status quo, and you will learn that's much better with IT than without. Then go in and lodge an intervention. So that's where we test our ideas of how we think the behavior can be changed. And then we see whether we have achieved a significant improvement in whatever we're interested in. Importantly, if you read the tourism literature, you will see that there is now an absolute flood, an avalanche of survey experiments. Not the same thing. Yes, survey experiments can still draw causal conclusions. But if the dependent variable is a stated behavioral intention, you might as well just not do the study. Yeah. Why? Oh, I don't have a slide on that, but I will briefly tell you, because there's something called social desirability bias. So if I complete a survey, despite the fact that I'm alone in a room completing the survey, I will always present the best Sara, right? So if someone asks me, do you litter? It's very unlikely I will admit to that. Yeah. So if we would ask people, do you only shower as long as necessary? We will get the wrong information. They will all say that they shower only as long as necessary. So specifically for what we're doing, where the aim is to change behavior, we have to do these experiments in a real world environment. So we have to measure real world shower use or whatever it is we try to change before and after the intervention. Only then can we go and say, yes, this particular practical measure is working. And then, of course, once we have developed a set of things that work, we need to go out and we need to communicate it to industry. And if we're smart, we try to make it a win-win-win. What do I mean by that? You will see a few examples today. But what I mean by that is that we can go to an industry and we can say, look, we have something you can do that's going to cost you no money or only a tiny amount of money. That is actually going to save you money. That will improve the environmental performance of your operations and will not negatively impact the environment. So the environment wins, the business wins, and in the best case, the tourist wins if they have more enjoyment. But at the very least, the tourist does not lose. Yeah. So if we can develop things that are that kind of win-win, we have the best possible chance of creating change. All right, now we're going to go to a few examples. And what I'm going to do is I'm first going to talk you through a few examples that are analog, right? So they're not using IT. And as we go through those examples, I will tell you just how difficult and slow and expensive and labor intensive it is to run this kind of research manually without the support of IT. So here's one of the legendary studies on towel reuse. In fact, towel reuse is the single most studied behavior, right? Which is fascinating because it's not the single most environmentally unsustainable behavior. But this study was conducted in an American hotel. And the research team tested several things. I will not talk you through all of them. But basically, they measured from the hotel database how many towels were replaced as a baseline. And then they went in and they tried different things. And the thing that works best was a pledge. So tourists at reception were told that the hotel is working hard to reduce towel use and asked the guests, would you commit to reusing your towels? And in this particular intervention, not only did they commit by signing a commitment, but they also received a little badge that they could put, that they could wear around the resort to show all the others that they are reusing the towels. So you can immediately see which of the approaches it is, right? So this is working with social norms. So it's the internal commitment that's a strong internal psychological driver. It's very effective, in fact. But it's also the pin which makes visible your commitment to others and makes you stand out as the person who does the right thing. So that little intervention has reduced towel use by 40%. And you can immediately see the win-win. So the 40% is really good for the environment, but it also dramatically reduces the cost of the hotel. So win-win and no impact on guest satisfaction. So win-win-win. That's the kind of work we want to achieve. A very simple thing for them to do with really good impact in terms of environment and money. And the leverage point for this particular one is social norm. Still on increasing towel use, there's another very powerful social norm intervention, and it consists of nothing else but a sign that imposes peer pressure. So you can see here, the majority of guests in this room reuse their towels. We're not talking about the environment, right? We're not talking about the majority of tourists. We're not talking about the majority of tourists in this hotel, but we are bringing it right up close to the person whose behavior we want to change. So people just like you, people who are in this room, reuse them, right? Not even a request to reuse them. And so this sign alone increased reuse by 44%, really nice cost reductions and equally happy guests. Again, the theoretical leverage point here is the social norm. All right, now what we decided to do is that the towels are great, but actually we could achieve much more sustainable effect by getting people to completely opt out of room cleaning. Yeah, because when a cleaner goes into the room, replacing the towels is only one of the aspects. Usually they will go and vacuum clean the room. They will, make the bed, sometimes even change the linen, but that doesn't happen so much anymore. Then they will replace the towels and they will clean the bathroom. So you can see this was a collaboration with Bohin Eco Hotel, an absolutely marvelous hotel in Slovenia, which is where I'm born. And in this hotel, we were fortunate enough to have some automatic measurement devices already. That is very early stage. And we found that that for every time they cleaned the room, they used 35 liters of water, they used 1.5 kilowatt hours of electricity, and they used 100 milliliters of chemicals. In fact, these are outliers, but we saw that there are cleaners who literally come into the room, switch the water on in the bathroom, and just keep it running for the entire duration of the room clean. So if we can manage to avoid room cleans, we are doing much more good than by only avoiding the towels. Now you're going to say, Sara, it's nothing new. All hotels do it. And yes, all hotels do it now. But you see, our study was in 2010. And when we ran that study, there was actually very little information about how effective the attempts by hotels are to try to entice people to not have their rooms cleaned. So at the time, the only information we could find was an article in the New York Times that claimed that various incentives hotel gives people lead to a 9% reduction. Okay, so that was kind of our benchmark. So what we did was just a little bit more sophisticated than your usual bribe. So first of all, we needed to find out what's the baseline. And at this particular hotel, the baseline was 3%. So 3% of guests, without any behavioral change intervention, put a sign out that says, I don't need my room cleaned today. All right. So within the hotel, that's our baseline. And then we gave them a free drink, but not just a free drink, because we did some qualitative research. And that's a good opportunity to share with you. I'm a big fan of qualitative research. You will see that everything I do is quantitative, but without qualitative research, we gain no insights. We need qualitative research to learn about what's happening in people's brains that we can latch onto and then develop something that works. So in this particular study, what we did was a qualitative study, try to figure out how could we communicate this to be most effective? And what we found was that people are super skeptical about how genuine the attempts are to get people to opt out of room cleaning. So the reaction of people was, they're only doing that to save money. No tourist believed that it was for the environment. They all just thought, oh, well, they're just giving us like a cheap drink, or sometimes it's a voucher, but it just means they're going to make more money, so we're not participating. So knowing this from the qualitative research, we went and said, all right, well, we will communicate just slightly differently with these people. We're going to use equity theory. I'm not sure if you heard of equity theory, very, very long, old theory of human relationships that say that people feel most comfortable when they give as much as they get, right? If you get more than you give, you feel like giving more. If you give more than you get, you feel pretty unhappy and you stop giving, right? So equity theory says it's about the balance. So we leveraged this theory and we said, all right, then, we would like to save the environment. No, not save the environment. We would like to get you initially to opt out of room cleaning. Every time we do not clean your room, we save 10 euros. What we would like to offer you is that 5 of those euros we save, 5 of the euros go to you. So we split the savings. We admit the savings, but we're just going to go halves. We're going to split them in half. So that intervention, at this point still, we're not talking about the environment, reduced room cleaning by 42%. That's absolutely massive for a hotel, right? So that's not only environmentally massive, it's absolutely massive in terms of cost savings. Yeah. And there was no impact on guest satisfaction. In fact, it's quite fascinating just how happy adult people can be when they get a free drink. So there was a very, very lively black market where they were trading their drinks vouchers. Now, very interesting from a theoretical point of view is that we then actually did add an environmental appeal. So that first condition you see, it was just the drinks voucher with the sharing proposition. Then what we did is we stuck to the same model, drinks voucher sharing proposition, but additionally, we told them how good that behavior would be for the environment. Now, remember, if indeed they are processing it and they change their attitudes through this information, then we should see a further increase, but there is no further increase, right? So the 42% effect comes purely from the drinks voucher combined with the offer to share the profit, basically. Zero additional effect if we talk about the environment. So that's not bad, right? But you would argue that's a bit complicated and we need to manage drinks. So here's a much easier way to achieve the same thing. And again, you will see that hotels are actually increasingly doing it now. It's been a little while since we tested it. We tested it in a different hotel. The previous hotel was very much a leisure hotel, families, enjoyment, relaxing. Here, we're still in Slovenia. We are in the capital of Slovenia now, Ljubljana. And we went to a 3-star hotel, which is mainly frequented by business travelers. Not only, but mainly it's a city destination, lots of business travelers coming in. And what we did there is even simpler and even easier and cheaper to implement. So before we did the study, it was like any other hotel. There was a sign, and the room was cleaned automatically every day, except if you put the sign out and you say, no, thanks, I don't need my room cleaned. What we changed is, and this you will realize is a pure absolute nudging. This is classic nudging. It doesn't get more nudging than this. We changed it over. It's called a default change. So we said, yep, we're still happy to clean your room for free, but you need to tell us if you want it cleaned. Yeah. So now we've changed. We have not limited people's freedom. They can still do whatever they want. Still, there is no financial difference for either of the two models, but we've changed the choice architecture, right? And guess what? We reduced room cleaning by 63%. So for the hotel, this was a lot less effort, but much higher result, zero impact on guest satisfaction. So of course, you're going to say, Sara, but that's a business hotel. Yes, that's true. So different interventions will work different in different contexts, no doubt about that. So here we had mainly business travelers, and frankly, they weren't in the room all day, right? So they couldn't care less if the room was cleaned or not. Yet in the old model, we were still cleaning it, yeah? So very, very simple measure where we can leverage nudging to entice consumers to behave more environmentally friendly. All right, let's move on to the next topic. The next topic is very close to my heart, and it's plate waste. Plate waste. Now, what's plate waste? Plate waste is a very, very specific type of food waste. So food waste can happen anywhere, from production, in transport, everywhere. Plate waste happens in one specific context, when a consumer sits down with food on their plate and they do not eat up everything on their plate. So the rest has to be thrown out. You can't do anything else with it. You can't donate it. You can't do anything. You've got to throw it out, right? But then more importantly for the tourism context, this happens mostly in buffet settings. So the enjoyment people have from the buffet meal does not come from wasting the food. It doesn't come from not eating the food, but rather it comes from enjoying as much as you can of different food items, right? So technically, it should be easy to change. So that's why we decided, let's try a few things where we can change plate waste. By the way, environmentally, huge impact. So food generally is responsible for 26% of all carbon emissions, yeah? And plate waste, the hotels we talk to, they say about a third, on average, a third of what people take from a buffet gets thrown out. Yeah, so huge possibility to create real change. So here we developed an enjoyment-based intervention. And again, we're in Slovenia. You see, it's funny, I'm sitting here in Australia and most of my field studies are in Slovenia, but that's because I have brilliant collaborators in Slovenia. So again, a beautiful seaside resort at the Mediterranean coast with a very large buffet and a lot of guests. So a really good test bed for us, a good field site. Also a lot of kids, yeah, so a lot of families there. And what we know from previous studies, our own studies in that very hotel, is that the families are the ones that create by far the most food waste, yeah. So they are a particularly interesting segment when it comes to trying to make real change. So we did the simplest thing you can possibly imagine, and everyone who's got a child knows how well it works. We developed a simple stamp collection book. So the stamp collection book is just an A4 piece of paper, no IT. Interestingly, actually, because it's a technology class, we did try to convert it into an app, and it failed totally. So we actually found this is so much easier to implement if you just give people an A4 piece of paper and then the waiter gives them stamps than to try to do it as an app. So what they did is at reception, they got the A4 paper. And then at this hotel, the usual arrangement is breakfast buffet and breakfast dinner. Breakfast dinner is particularly interesting because you have a waiter assigned to you, right? So every time you come to dinner as a family, you need to go to the same table and you will have the same waiter for the duration of your stay. Now that's important for our research because that waiter can give them a stamp at the end of the meal if they've eaten up everything. So every dinner, when the family eats up everything, the waiter gives them a stamp. And if they get stamps for every single day they stayed at the hotel, they then get a prize. And this has led to 38% reduction in plate waste. So that's quite substantial. That's a third less plate waste than before. And what makes this intervention so particularly attractive is the kids loved it, right? So this is not just a little bit of extra enjoyment. These kids loved the game so much that they boycotted it when the parents wanted to go out elsewhere for dinner. If they did go elsewhere to dinner, they would come and bring the invoice back and say, can I still have a stamp because we ate everything up at the restaurant? So this game really, really added holiday enjoyment to families. And because it was in a Central European context, it was also very well aligned with the parental messaging. So this is a win-win-win-win-win, right? The hotel wins because they save a lot of money for unnecessary food purchasing as well as food disposal. The guests, well, sorry, that's the cost. The environment wins because we are suddenly dramatically reducing, well, by about a third, right? All the whole chain of emissions generated during the food production cycle. And then we have actually made our tourists happier. So this is really the case where that illustrates just how powerful enjoyment-based interventions are. All right, now reducing plate waste using social norms. This is not my research, but I have to tell you because it's one of my all-time favorite studies. It was run in 52 chain hotels in Scandinavia, and the authors tried two different things. This one was the first one. Welcome back again and again. Visit our buffet many times. That's better than taking a lot at once. Now, you might think, Sara, this is a belief, but it's not a belief. This is primarily a social norm. So again, what we know from qualitative research, we know that people are in a social context and they feel observed, right? Like other people in the dining room can see what they're doing. So they don't want to be seen to go to the buffet many times. So what do? They go once, and they put too much on their plate. And then inevitably, they can't eat it up. So what this sign does very, very smartly, it changes the social norm. It actually says to guests, no, it's not embarrassing for you to go back. We love it when you go back. It's much more embarrassing if you've taken too much at once. Yeah. So this little sign, which probably you can get for $1, right? Reduced plate waste by a fifth, 21%. So absolutely fabulous, fabulous outcome with no negative impact on guest satisfaction. And here's my all-time favorite, and this is a classic nudging. This is a classic nudging intervention. So what did the same authors did this, and very simple. They reduced the plate size by 3 centimeters. So originally the diameter was 24 centimeters. They shrunk it by 3 centimeters to 21. Now, do you see the beauty of this? No communication, no preaching about the environment, no begging people to do anything, just a slightly smaller plate, slightly smaller, but not unreasonably small, right? And so here the reduction was also 20%. So that's a classic nudging, zero impact on guest satisfaction. Why? Because remember, nudging, we are not allowed to reduce people's freedom. We are not reducing their freedom. The plate is a little bit smaller. They can go back as often as they want. We are not limiting what or how much they eat. So classic nudging approach. All right, a few more just to give you a bit of a better feeling of what other behaviors we can target. So one is cotton serviettes. That's going to be quite unexpected to you. It was certainly also unexpected to us. So when we were working with Boch in Eco Hotel on the opt-out of room cleaning study, we debrief. We actually like to debrief with the hotels because the hotels work with us when we run an experiment. So we like to then go back to them and tell them how the study went. So we were debriefing with the hotel, and the food and beverage manager says, oh, well, we asked them, what other behaviors do you think we could target? And he said, oh, the cotton serviettes. And we went, well, what's wrong with the cotton serviettes? Well, turns out that at the breakfast buffet, when you come to the table, you will find a beautifully folded, large, white, thick cotton serviette on your plate. So if you want to have breakfast, you've got to grab the serviette. At the very least, you have to take it off the plate. Yeah. More commonly, people will take it and put it on their lap. But basically, you can't eat if you don't take that cotton serviette away. And the food and beverage manager said it's an environmental disaster because every time someone touches the serviette, I need to wash it, which uses water, electricity, and chemicals. And then I need to iron it, which uses more energy. So first we were fascinated because we thought cotton serviettes are more friendly than single-use serviettes, but turns out they're not. So when we did the calculations, it turns out that if you have recycled single-use serviettes, it's only a third of the emissions of the cotton serviettes. So we said, all right, well, let's try that. And what we did is, this is meant to be a cotton serviette. I know it looks like a boat, but just imagine it's a cotton serviette. And we simply replaced So it's kind of nudging, but you will see it's not totally. So what we wanted to do is just replace the cotton serviette with the paper serviette. We couldn't. Why not? And that's another really important lesson for field experimentation. The director of the hotel said, no way. I am a fancy hotel. My guests do not want recycled paper serviettes. We can't do that. So we negotiated with him, and in the end, he agreed to do it, but only under two conditions. One condition was that we had cotton serviettes at the buffet, so people were able to go to the buffet if they felt deeply that they needed a cotton serviette. And secondly, we put a sign on the table that explained to people that they could get a cotton serviette, and also explained to them the reason why we were changing it over. Yeah. And the reason is that, it's just a lot more environmentally friendly. So this little intervention reduced the use of cotton serviettes practically totally, right? So 95% change. We suspect that whoever took the cotton serviette did it accidentally, right? Because here it was really fantastic. The hotel has a standard satisfaction survey for all guests that check out. So we were able to add a few questions to that survey. And the results showed that really absolutely nobody was unhappy. Nobody cared. So we did not influence guest satisfaction. But in the open-ended part of the questions, we had a lot of people really positively commenting and saying, wow, I really learned something that was really new for me. This is really exciting. So that was a real win. Of course, sadly, the director went straight back to the cotton serviettes after the experiment, because he just couldn't, right? He couldn't let go of his preconceived idea what luxury is. So it didn't work, but we know it works. Like for a hotel that doesn't have so strong feelings about it, this is a wonderful opportunity to create a change. And now another study that's not by us, but that I think is just absolutely fabulous is we're going backstage and we're looking at cooks. So here it's about food preparation ways. So I'm chopping up the cucumber and the two ends go in the bin, right? Now, the authors of this study had a very beautiful, the best ideas are the simplest ideas. So here's a simple idea. They said currently in the kitchens, we have very large and intransparent rubbish bins. How about we change that and we make them smaller and we also make them transparent so we can see what's inside. And guess what? That little change reduced food preparation by waste by 73%. I mean, that's just massive. That must be one of the most successful experiments ever. And now you ask why, and here we go back to the qualitative research, right? So why? What's happened that has had such a massive effect? And it was two things happening simultaneously. One thing was that the cooks are lazy. Well, lazy. They're either lazy or they're busy. You can see it either way. But the last thing they want to do is go 5 times a day and empty a bin, right? So to avoid having to empty the bin, they simply made sure that they threw less out. So they just cut a little bit less of the end of the cucumber off, right? Wonderful. And then the second thing is the transparency of the bin. So as the chef walks around and sees what all the cooks are doing, if he sees half a cucumber in there, or she, I apologize, then she or he would say, well, hang on, Jimmy, Freddie, Jenny, why is there half a cucumber? That's totally unacceptable. So between those two things happening, we have a 73% reductions with a very simple, very cheap intervention. All right, now what I haven't talked, but I should have, I didn't talk about just how complicated it is to measure the dependent variable for all those experiments. So here, for this one, for example, someone needs to go and weigh how much waste was in the bin before it's emptied. Yeah, you can imagine how labor intensive that is. If you think about the stamp collection game, it was even worse. We did that study over 2 months, and we needed an RA in the kitchen all the time because the RA, research assistant, had to intercept the waiter as they brought the plate in, take the plate, and take out to separate the plate waste from the other food waste. Yeah, hugely, hugely labor intensive. So as a result, or even the opting out of room cleaning, the towels, you need to work with the hotel to try to get the information about which room, how often was it exchanged. hugely, the consequence of this is that we have a very slow knowledge development process. So these field experiments take a huge amount of time, and they are super labor intensive. They work at snail speed. They're super expensive. I mean, imagine how much it costs to pay a human RA, not a robot, a human RA, to stand in the kitchen for 2 months. Yeah. For most researchers, it's simply unaffordable, right? And it's random. And why do I say it's random? It's random because to do all of this, you can really only do it at one hotel. You can't do it in 100 hotels, right? But as soon as you do it in one hotel, the result will also depend on the context. So remember, we had the nice family hotel at the beach with the stamp collection BAME, and then we have the business hotel, but they're very different things. So in a perfect world, if I have an idea of how I can change behavior, I want to run it across 50 hotels that are very different so I can make generalizable conclusions. So the fact that we are having to do everything manually stands in the way of that. So then let's ask, how can we use IT in a very smart way and in different ways, as you will see, to make it cheaper, less random, less labor intensive, and faster. So here's a study that my friend and colleague Jorge Arana did a while ago. This is also not a new study anymore, but it's absolutely brilliant, and anyone should implement this. They went to a website. This website is offered in Spain for subsidized holidays for senior residents. Okay, so the old people, probably with the help with their grandchildren or children, go in and see different holiday options, and then they can book something. And these are reduced price because pensioners don't have much money. So old people are the market segment. And what did Jorge do? He first looked at what do people usually book. And then he had different interventions. I think maybe 3 or 4 different ones. But the most effective one was this one. He showed them, before they were allowed to choose a holiday, he showed them a video of kids the age of their grandkids, basically, and that showed the impact of the carbon emissions a holiday causes on our planet into the future. And that had a massive effect on the carbon, on the CO2 that was chosen, right? They saw the CO2 emissions, and they chose a lot less emitting holidays as a result of that intervention than they would have before. Now, where's the beauty of this in terms of technology? Well, Jorge didn't have to manually count who booked what, right? Because this is now an online booking interface. So automatically we can extract the data, what was booked before and what was booked after the intervention. So that means we can run thousands of experiments on a site like that to find what the best way is. So much more cheaper, faster, more efficient, less random. Another one where IT plays a main role is reducing water use in showers, specifically hot water use. Well, actually, it's 2 studies you can see, because one just came out in 24. So that's literally hot off the press. Both those studies want to reduce shower time. But for the top study, Tiefenbeck and colleagues, they measure the electricity used to heat the water, and the bottom study is looking at the actual water use. So they use a technology which measures. It doesn't actually measure it, but it gives an indication of how many liters of water are being used during the shower, and then provides the feedback back to the guests. So imagine you're standing in the shower, and there is a little device that goes 1, 2, 3 and shows you the liters you are using. And that is super efficient. So in the first study, it was a 11% power reduction. In the bottom study, it was a 26 water runtime reduction. Remember, again, we are not preaching. We're just showing them the liters of water that are being used. And technology is doing all the work for us. So technology is now serving as the measurement device, but also as the behavioral change intervention. So the technology records as well as provides the feedback that changes the behavior. So you can again see the ability of being able to try different things now is just unprecedented. Xavier Font is one of the authors on the bottle one, and I believe he told me they have multiple thousands of rooms wired up with that technology. So they can now go on, and every month they could try something else if the hotels let them, to find out how we can reduce shower time. So wonderful work. All right, now we're taking it one step further, and we are seeing what else could we measure automatically and continuously without involving any humans. And a study we've done, and we are still measuring this, but I want to show you some interesting initial insights, is minibar use. So you would know most hotels, actually most hotels, even motels, will have a little mini fridge. And so the question we asked ourselves is, do we really need a mini fridge in every single hotel room? Because you can only imagine how much electricity that uses. Yeah. So what did we do? We used technology that is literally at the leading edge. Like, this stuff is being developed as we speak. And it is wireless technology, but it's not Wi-Fi. It's something called LoRaWAN. The beauty of LoRaWAN is that it is technically has very far reach. So a lot of city data is collected with LoRaWAN. But the other beauty for us is that it is very environmentally sustainable. So the energy use of these devices is incredibly low. So one of these devices can run for 16 years on one battery, right? Because the last thing we want to do with our research is cause more of an environmental problem. So we conducted this study with Best Western hotels in Australia, 3 of them. You can see the pictures down here. And what we did is we used these 3 devices. This one here is the gateway. All it does, its only job is transmitting data. This one here is a PowerPoint. So what we do is we take the mini fridge PowerPoint, put this one in the PowerPoint and the mini fridge in here. And that allows, actually it allows 2 things. It gives us a measure by the minute, by the second if we want, of how much power is being consumed. But this one's pretty smart. This one also allows us to control it. And you will see why that's important in one of the other studies I will discuss with you. So we have the data transmitter. We have the power measurement, which we plug into the back of every single fridge. And then we have this little white device here, this one here, which looks like nothing very exciting, but I think it's extremely exciting. Oh God, sorry, I pressed the wrong button. See if I can make it disappear again. So what this thing does is it's a contact switch. So we put one part of it on the door of the fridge and one part underneath. So every time the fridge is opened, we know. So it's actually a measure of the behavior of the guest. It measures how often the guest is using this mini fridge. So just using these 3 devices, we can learn about energy consumption as well as guest use. And so what I'll show you now is one single room, and you will see 2 bars. You will see blue bars and red bars. The blue bars is the electricity consumption. And as you can see, that electricity consumption is pretty constant. Now you're going to say, Sara, at the start, there's a little bit less. Yep, that's true. And the explanation for that is that those mini fridges are quite sensitive to the room temperature. So if you have the aircon running to cool the room, then the fridge will use less electricity. If it's super hot in the room, the fridge needs to work harder. Yeah, so there's going to be some variation with the room temperature. But generally, the fridge just uses the same amount every day. And now look at the red bars. They are just so exciting. Well, I think they're exciting. Because what you can almost see the individual guest group, right? So here, the first cluster of red bars is one guest group. Here's another cluster. Here's another guest group, and so on. Here, there was probably some vacancy. So what we see here is there absolutely are guest groups that use the fridge. No doubt about it. So these guys are using it, the second lot, the third lot. But then look at this. Then we have quite a substantial number of guests where we see the door being opened once or twice. Now, once we know is the cleaner, because the cleaner cannot, between guests, the cleaner always needs to open the fridge to make sure there's no rotten sandwich in there, right? So a lot of these cases we see here further down the timeline. We have one opening for the cleaner and then a second opening, which is when the guest says, you know, is there something in there or is it empty? And that's it. 2 openings, no more than that. Yeah. So what we can tell here, and that's why these are insights that can inform policy decisions. So governments could say, you know, Queensland prohibits the use of minibars in every room. Each hotel is only allowed to have 30% of their rooms with minibars. But it could also inform the policies of hotel groups. So hotel groups could say, well, actually, if there's evidence that my guests are not all using it, why don't I just put on my booking platform the option to book a room with or without fridge? Doesn't even have to be a surcharge, right? But if you don't care, just take a room without the fridge. So, and all is technology, right? This is all technology. So just basically using technology to provide the data. And now we could also go and test interventions, because this data is coming into our database every minute of the day. Another example of where technology saved us was in the midst of COVID. So what happened is we wanted to reduce plate waste at the buffet. And we had all these great ideas. And then COVID came and all Australian hotels were shut. There was no buffet in operation. Everything was shut. And one of my research assistants, the engineer research assistant, was stuck in China because you couldn't move freely between Australia and the rest of the world. So what did we do? We just went to a Chinese hotel, which I have never been in, right? And ran a study. And that's only possible because of technology. So we installed a plate waste system. You can see here, that's not at that hotel. That's just to show you how it works. So we have a flat scale on the floor, and the bin where the plate waste goes is put on top. And then we have this ugly little box. It's looking nicer now, but at that time it was an ugly little box that transmits. Again, we can say by the second, by the minute, continuously transmits the data on the plate waste to us. So we know how much plate waste is generated per minute. What we also know is how many people are in the room. How do we measure that? We have a people counter above the entrance to the dining room. And then we transmit the data to our database. So we know for every single meal that is a buffet meal in this restaurant, we know without human measurement, the plate waste in grams generated per person per meal. And that's the thing we want to reduce, okay? And then I had a Chinese PhD student. He trialed several signs. I won't bore you with that because we're going to run out of time. But this was the most effective sign. And it basically says in the most friendly of ways that the chairman is endorsing the Clean Plate campaign. Interestingly, the Clean Plate campaign was a grassroots campaign in China where the people said, we can't waste so much food. And so the quote here endorses, is the chairman saying this is a cool campaign. Yeah. And have a look what that does. So we just put the table sign on, probably 10 cents worth of table sign. And you can see the red line is when we have the table sign, and the blue line is for every day, the measurement without the table sign. So there's always variation, right? For whatever reasons, a school comes, a big conference comes, it varies. But overall, the reduction is 7%. So that sounds like nothing, but actually, if you think about achieving that every single day of running the hotel, that is actually really a big win, both for the environment and for the hotel. All right, and what else are we doing here? What are we doing here? What are we doing here? Yes, I know. I should have written a note for myself. This is something we're doing as we speak. Again, I'm super excited about it. So when we talk to hotels, the single biggest problem they tell us they have is electricity use, because in Australia, electricity has become insanely expensive. All right. So all these Best Western hotels, all hotels, but our hotel partners at Best Western, when we ask them what would be most valuable to you in terms of saving money, they say air conditioner use in the rooms. Yeah. So what we developed is a little system that allows us to measure relatively accurately how much the air conditioner is being used per hotel room, right? So why does that sound so complicated? Because think about it. Most hotels are small and medium sized. So they will have all sorts of antique air conditioners that we need to somehow capture if they're running or not. Big hotels have no problem. They will have super duper technical solutions. They know anyway what people are using, and they can control it remotely. But it's all those little small hotels that can't do it. So our system allows us to measure, here they are, with 2 devices. This one is, again, the gateway, it transmits data. And this little white thing does nothing else but to measure humidity and temperature. Yes, only humidity and temperature. And we put it so that we can capture the air flowing out of the vent. So it can be a ducted system, it can, whatever system, doesn't matter, as long as we can put this little white device into the stream of where the air comes out. And what are we collecting? This is the kind of data we're collecting. And I'm again here just showing you one room, but you can see here a timeline. So you can see we start with the 3rd of August, we go until the 10th, and we have several measurements per day. And the green line is the outside temperature in Tasmania, which is the colder part of the Australian country. And the blue line is the temperature in the room. Yeah, temperature in the room. That's measured with our little device. So you see the green line goes up and down because that's the daily day-night cycle. Blue line, very interesting. So 15 degrees, presumably nobody is in the room. Someone checks in, cranks up the air conditioner to 30 degrees Celsius, like that's insanely hot, right? Then we drop down to 20 and up to 30 again and back to the baseline. Yeah. So suddenly, with the help of this technology, we can automatically measure air conditioner use in the hotel. And we're currently doing that. We have a study running in multiple Best Westerns, but in one of them, we have just launched our interventions. So we are testing 2 different signs and a baseline to see if we can use a very simple, cute little sign of an air conditioner that asks for a favor, basically, to reduce air conditioner use, both in terms of switching the aircon on and off, as well as in terms of the temperature they set on the aircon. I don't have results for you yet, but that's also not the point. I think the point today is to show you the power of technology, both in being able to measure and report behavior, but also as a key, objective, accurate, dependent variable for experimental research. All right, and then we're gonna finish, I think, with one last example I want to show you, because that's kind of been just so successful that it's a good grand finale. Remember, we used the PowerPoints when we were doing the mini fridges. Actually, oh no, it's the wrong one. Sorry, I won't show you that yet. So we had those little PowerPoints when we had the mini fridges. We used those same PowerPoints here for a very similar problem. Here it's about heating. So it's not cooling with the air conditioning, but it's actually electric heaters in a university residential college. So in this particular college, Grace College here at the University of Queensland, every student has a little electric heater, and it's under their bench, under their desk, and it's plugged into a PowerPoint. And before we came in, they just had to crawl under the table, basically, and switch it on or off. Yeah. Now, what we did is we measured electricity use for all 13 plus 20, 39 rooms that you can see in this pie chart. But then the golden rooms had an on-off button. They didn't have to climb under the door. We provided, I will show them to you in a second, on-off buttons. So they controlled the heaters in the same way they did before, with an on and an off button. The 13 rooms in purple, we put them on a timer. So they only had one button, and they pressed it to activate, so to switch the heater on. And then 2 hours later, the heater goes off, but they can press the button again. So technically, they can still have the heater running all the time. They just have to press the heater again. And now look at that difference. So here you see, oh, sorry, that's the devices. So this is, again, our PowerPoint. This is the buttons. That's the data transmission device. And here's the distribution of the electricity cost. Well, it's electricity use, but transformed to dollars, right? And you can see the golden rooms are using a lot more. The purple rooms are consistently using a lot less electricity. In this case, it was actually, depending which time frame you go, I think overall it might have been 60, but the time frame we ended up reporting in the paper was even higher, was 72%. But no, we didn't manipulate it. It's just that we were collecting data for such a long period that some of it had to be corrected. It doesn't matter what it is. It's a massive impact, right? Massive impact. And now you can see again, this is a classic nudging approach. No preaching, no attitude change. All we're doing is we're changing the infrastructure that determines the behavior we are interested to change. All right, and that brings me to the conclusions. Conclusions. Sustainable tourism, honestly, it's total work in progress. We in academia have been talking about it since '93, so that's 30 years. And yet the number of practical measures we've developed to actually change something is very, very low. So if anyone is still looking for a research topic, this is your topic. This is such an important topic. And we need to work real hard to develop more and more measures that can make tourism operate in more environmentally sustainable ways. Sustainability does not always cost money, and it doesn't always reduce guest satisfaction. That is something that is not generally understood. If we talk to businesses, there's always the assumption that if they do something for sustainability, it will automatically come with a very big price tag. It's really important to communicate that that is not at all the case. Or they have the assumption that, well, if we're going to be sustainable, we are inevitably going to annoy the guests because we're asking them for a favor. Again, I hope that the examples we've discussed today show you that that does not need to be the case at all. So we can absolutely and totally develop smart behavior change intervention that do not cost money. Actually, some of them save money, and that don't reduce guest satisfaction. Actually, some of them increase guest satisfaction. What we need is we really need research industry collaboration. And I don't know how it is in your work environment, but here in Australia, there is a massive push towards working with industry. And yet I don't know many people who are really effective at it, because here it's not a consulting type collaboration, but it really needs to be a partnership, right? So we as academics need to work with industry that is genuinely willing to work with us and also take a little bit of a risk, right? Today, I only talked to you about the successful experiments. I could talk another 1.5 hours about the unsuccessful ones. So as we approach industry partners, we always seek their input. So they will also not allow us to test everything we want to test. But they need to be quite aware of the fact that some of these things are not going to work. So it is a true partnership. It is not kind of a consulting job. So a very different nature of industry research collaboration. We need it because we need to do field experiments. We need to use actual behavior as our dependent variable. We need technology. I hope that you have seen this. We can do it without, but really that's not taking the foot off the accelerator. Right? Like we just need to speed up our ability to produce new effective behavioral change interventions. And from all my experience of doing these experiments, I just can't see that happening unless we have technology involved, at least at the measurement side, but probably better even both at the measurement and at the intervention side. Legislation is the way to go. Yeah, it's not that's not something that's in my control. But if we want to get really serious about the speed of creating change, then we really have no option but change legislation. So whenever I get an opportunity to talk to groups that contain governments, I make that point quite firmly, because I think some of these legislative changes, the governments wouldn't be punished for, right? Because if you go in and you regulate something that's going to save the industry money, surely that's not a bad thing. And finally, this is pretty urgent. Yeah, so 30 years we've been writing articles about sustainable tourism, and it's quite clear we don't have another 30 years. So I don't know how long we have. Every expert has a different view. I was talking with a colleague from engineering who is working on new fuels for aviation. And he says 10 years max, there is just the point of no return. So there's not much time. And developing effective interventions and leveraging the power of information technology to achieve that, I believe, is the way to go. And that's it from me, but I like the question time the best because I want to interact with you guys. So I'm going to unshare my screen. I hope that you will show me your faces and we can have a little bit of a chat.
Thank you very much, Professor Sara Dolnicar, which is fantastic presentation ever I've seen so far. Quite trade-off effect. You know, so far a lot of people concerned the environment, concern and the sustainability concern, and then we're focusing on that kind of issue only, rather than technology inclusive. But you invite technology effect for increasing sustainability growth and effect and cost reduction, which is fantastic. Actually, I've been since smart tourism about 10 years, but honestly, we're focusing on functional based, information processing based for making efficiency and effectiveness of smart tourism context, rather than considering the sustainable growth. But I understand now. I'm trying to changing the theme of smart tourism 2.0 for environmental side and the sustainable side, like when you have done so far. My question is that, last summer I've been to the German and I experienced a PANT system. Have you used before PANT system?
What is it? Oh, PANT. That's recycling. Yeah.
Yes, recycling.
I grew up in Austria. We've had that all through my childhood, and in fact, it's gotten worse. When I was a child, if you bought a bottle, right, you could then go back to the place where you bought the bottle, put it into a machine, and you would get cash back, right?
Yes, right.
Now it doesn't exist anymore in Austria. So when I was a child, in supermarkets, they had the return machines, right?
Yes.
So yes, absolutely. That was a great solution, but clearly it wasn't profitable because they're gone, at least in Austria.
Oh, really? It's quite surprising to me, and they using the system, and you know what? But my question is actually, tourist perspective. Traveler is visiting a destination and consuming the product over there and spend the time for fun. They don't care. They don't care the foreign country's policy. They don't care the people over there, the residential side. As a tourist, I want to spend my time and garbage and then just using the tower as much as I can. That's the benefit of the tourist. But the government and then the residential side and the citizen base, they regulate us to follow up their rules and policy. So it's kind of something I don't want to. If I go to the Australia and then they enforce me to follow up their rules, and I don't like it actually. So that's pretty much trade-off relationship as a tourist, as citizens. So what do you think about that point?
Well, absolutely. It's a huge difference, right? So people ask me, why am I studying this in tourism? Because my research is not specifically like the principles can be applied to any consumer, right? But tourism is a whole different world, right? When I'm at home and I save water, I save money. When I'm at home and I save electricity, I save money. When I'm at home, my life is not all about enjoyment and pleasure, right? It's all about responsibility and arguing with the kids and getting work done. But when I'm on holiday, I want to enjoy myself. That's my primary purpose. I don't want to be responsible. I just want to do whatever I want. I've already paid for the room night, so there's no benefit for me to save electricity. So it's a totally different ballgame, totally. And it's much harder. That's why I love the tourism context. For my work, my logic is, if I can change someone's behavior in the tourism context, I can change it anywhere. Because I think it is the hardest context where we can crack behavior change for sustainability.
So what's the rationality? Is a reason for tourists changing their behavior in a destination?
Well, I mean, as I said, you can change it because you enjoy what I'm offering you. So if I say, the stamp collection game, kids loved it. So they ate up. We never talked about the environment. They ate up everything that was on the plate because they loved playing a game. Actually, there was another recent one which we haven't published that was really successful. Oh, yes, I know. That's confidential because we haven't published it yet. But we had another plate waste one recently in a Slovenian hotel, and we already have the data for that, where they could win for every meal. If they ate up, they went into a lottery for a dessert and massively changed. Why? Because we offered more enjoyment, right? So this is no problem. You can leverage enjoyment to achieve behavior change. You can leverage changes in choice architecture, right? So it's more effort to put a sign out, please make my room, than to not put the sign out. So lots of things we can do. It just requires commitment and a little bit of creativity.
Okay. Students, feel free to ask Professor Sara Dolnicar about questions, research questions, or whatever.
Yes, can I give?
Sure.
Yeah. I'm very happy. I mean, it is such an honor to me to see you through online, even like we're online. So when Professor Ko invites a professor, personally, I like researching. I mean, a little on Google Scholar about the professors. And when I researched about you, I was so surprised. Yeah, because you are a prominent researcher in the field of tourism and known for your work on sustainable tourism. So I'm so happy. And my question, I want to give you two questions. The first question is, what inspired you to focus your research on sustainable tourism? What motivates you to continue and making a difference in this field? This is my first question. And the second question is, how do you see the future of sustainable tourism evolving in next few years? I mean, considering emerging trends and challenges. These are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thanks for your kind words. So what motivates me? Well, actually, I've done a lot of very different things. And I think if you're going to have an academic career, it gets pretty boring to do the same thing all the time. So the first 20 years, I did market segmentation methodology. Then I did some research on public acceptance of recycled water. Then I did some research on foster care, how to find good foster carers for children in need. So the sustainability issue is only recent, actually. I probably have only started with that maybe 10 years ago. So I haven't always been doing it. It's a new thing for me. But what motivates me? There's multiple things that motivate it. I like a challenge. So I'm not particularly interested to do another boring paper. Just doesn't excite me, right? Because I want to come to my work happy every day. So I've got to do something that I enjoy. And the second thing that motivates me is that you're at the beginning of your careers. I'm towards the end of mine. So I maybe have another 10 years, maybe 12 until I retire. And I just want to make a difference, okay? I don't want to, at the end of it, I want to look back on my work life and say, I have created change. I have created positive change. And that's what motivates me. And whether I will achieve it or not, I don't know. But it guides all my decisions about what research I engage in. Oh, and the second question, sorry. The second question is, where is sustainable tourism going? Oh, do you want my hope or do you want my realistic evaluation?
Well, actually, realistic evaluation.
It's going to go nowhere. Yeah. It's going to go nowhere. My realistic evaluation is, unless something dramatic happens, people will always fly. People will always want to travel far away to go on holiday. They will... it's very, very difficult. So I think unless there is real collective action, it will not happen. And sadly, I'm seeing trends in Europe and in the US, for example, that collective environmental goals are starting to be softened, let's put it this way. And already with the hardest of aims, nothing happened. So yeah, I think it really takes commitment and collective action. But that doesn't mean I'm giving up, right? You just asked me about the realistic estimate, but there's also a lot of hope. So for example, I'm working now with a consulting company that's developing a 10-year plan for a tourist destination. And so all these things we discussed today will flow into a destination's long-term plan. And so if you think about the power of that, that's super exciting, right? Because if at that destination, every hotel decides to implement only 3 of those measures, we are making a difference. Yeah. But why is my realistic estimate so bad? Because tourism keeps growing. Tourism keeps growing. Yeah. So unless we do something radically different, we can never compensate for the 3% emissions change. Yeah. So overall, it will not be me who can change the world, but I can change a small part of the world. And, that'll be enough for me for retirement. And I'm hoping that along the way, we can inspire and motivate governments and large companies to take real action, because without that, it's not going to happen.
Okay, very good. Actually, climate change and the fossil fuel emission, those kind of keyword is a big keyword for all of the world, all of the country, and we are heading to that directions. So your research work and the output of your research is inspiring the policymakers and tourism policymakers and to changing their rules and regulations and enforcing to the attitude. It's fantastic. Somebody have to do that. So such a big name is impactful to the society and academia and even business. I believe so. Okay, next students.
Oh, wait. I'm very into experimental research. For the experimental research industry collaboration is important. As you mentioned, it seems survey-based is limitations. However, it's quite difficult. Absolutely. It's difficult due to many reasons, such as time and cost. And could you give me a tip on how to ask? Yeah, it's a really good question. Do you know what my observation is? Well, first of all, the tip is you never go and say, I will help you be more sustainable, because they're going to run as fast as they can, right? You go in and you say, I want to help you save cost. And then their ears start flapping, right? So you need to be clear that their motivation is never sustainability. It's always profit, profit, profit. So you need to hook them on what matters to them rather than what matters to you. The second thing is you've got to really listen to them. So I have a lot of my students and postdocs who have brilliant ideas. But then when they present it, we have a weekly group meeting where we discuss ideas. Those ideas will never be accepted by a hotel, right? So you've got to be realistic. So you have to work within the parameters of what the business will be ever willing to do. Yeah. And oftentimes when I work with hotels, I test their ideas, not my ideas. Yeah, because they have their own ideas. So it's really, that's why I'm saying it's a real partnership thing. It's not just kind of, yeah, so I think that's about it. But I also notice it's a real commitment. So I actually, that's a funny thing to say, but it's not my natural strength to work with industry. I'm a nerd, okay? So my natural strength is to sit alone in my office and write and read and think. That's my natural strength. So it takes a lot of my emotional energy to interact with industry. But what I've learned, because I have also, for example, students who would like to interact with industry, and some of them are more successful than others. And I think the ones that are successful are the ones that keep communicating. Yeah. So you kind of get a door in, you get some door opens. So then you need to start the conversation, but you can't stop at that. So you need to kind of keep that communication happening and keep giving them something that they value and then you take the trust further and further. You do something little with them. You give them the results, then you do something bigger with them. So it really is a commitment of almost a continuous conversation. I have one student who, well, I have many students, and basically I won't say, well, I will take one out because that student has been exceptionally successful. She met a hotel manager at a conference that we were all at. So all of us had the same chance to connect with that hotel manager. Probably 5 or 6 people from my group were at the conference. So she connects with that manager, develops a really good relationship at the conference, and then follows up immediately after the conference, coordinates my research group's activity because we have to install devices. So she takes full responsibility for coordinating what we can do at the hotel. Nobody else has ever talked to that manager. She's the only one who's ever talked to him. And he is willing to do everything. Yeah. So she has just developed such a wonderful, trusting relationship with that manager that she can run everything past him, knowing that he will say, yes, no, we can do this, we can't do this. Yeah. However, I will say one thing, we pay for everything. Yeah. So with small and medium hotels, it is practically impossible to get any money for your research. So I have to earn money through research grants, but I'm happy to pay because these people are giving me a real world field site. I don't mind if it costs me a bit of money to install a few sensors. Yeah? I hope that's a helpful answer. I'm not sure I did my best.
Okay. Any other questions from students?
Oh, I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
Sorry. First of all, thank you for your presentation. It was really impression to me. So I think for your lecture, I think it's important to convince the industry people and conduct together to show that environmental protection doesn't always reduce guest satisfaction. And in this sense, I learned from you that the nudge effect is an important concept. So my question is, are there any examples of how the nudge effect can be applied in other areas of the tourism industry outside of the hotel sector?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yes, there are examples, but I'm not sure that much has been done. There was a very interesting study, and I got very excited when I saw the title, but then I read it and it turned out not to really be, So it was a study published in Tourism Management that claimed that if you paint the sidewalks in a color, people are going to walk more, right? Now, if that would be the case, that would be an example of how you can nudge. But when you read the full paper, you find that they never tested it in any real world context, right? So it was a pure survey experiment. And so I don't believe that it's true, but it is an example. So you could, for example, you could have more bike lanes, or you could have free bike rentals, and that would change people's behavior for sure. Yeah. So absolutely, nudging is whenever you can influence, whenever you can change something around, for example, the 2 boats, right? You could, the eco-certified tour boat provider could have a green carpet saying, I am eco-certified, right? That would be a nudge, yeah? So absolutely, it can be used in any context. Just it hasn't. I'm not aware of many tourism nudging studies at all. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Other question? It's a great opportunity. Go ahead.
So, first of all, Professor, thank you very much. It was really interesting.
It's mute now.
Really?
I can't hear you. It's good.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
You should Yeah.
Yeah, so I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the great lecture. It was super interesting, really understandable, and interesting to listen. Since I had a few questions, but students already gave it to you, I will ask them really because I'm curious. You gave us a lot of examples, and we talked about successful researches. Only you said, but which one is you find the most interesting, and which one was most difficult to do?
Well, I think the most difficult ones were the food waste ones when we were manually measuring the food waste. They were by far the most difficult ones. And we also had lots of failures. We tried a lot of really cool stuff that didn't work, and that really hurts. If you try stuff that doesn't work and you're automatically measuring, it's not so painful. But if you spend all that time measuring manually, it just honestly breaks your heart. So I think those were probably the biggest failures just because of the effort that went into it, but it didn't lead to a result. Which ones are the most exciting ones? That's really hard to say. Maybe some of the ones we're doing now are the most exciting ones. Because I like I really like the stamp collection game, right? But I acknowledge that it's not trivial, right? It is a little bit of an extra effort for the hotel to do that. So I have a few things happening now, which I think increase enjoyment or make people laugh, but the effort for the hotel is a lot lower. Yeah. So for example, we have some really, really cute, amusing signs that we're trying to use for the air conditioner use. So for me, the best outcome would be if I can have something very cheap that can make a big change in behavior. So actually, of all the studies I've published so far, it is the default change of the room cleaning. Why? Because that is super easy to do, and it has a massive impact on sustainability, and it has a massive incentive for the business to adopt it because it makes their operations cheaper. Yeah. So I'm not kind of personally attached. I mean, the stamp collection game is the most fun, right? But in terms of what is most satisfying to me, I think it's the studies where I can achieve the most with the least effort. Not me as a researcher, as the unit deploying it. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions from student side?
Oh, there's a hand up. No? Oh, that's my cursor. That's not a hand.
Okay, if you not have, I will ask as kind of a professional, question. You're editor of the NRS, and every single researcher in tourism field, even hospitality, even the social science, really wish to publish our manuscript to the NRS. You are editor of the journals, and you got your policy and direction to the journals. So can I hear from your opinion about the methodological perspective? Because it's a data-driven society these days, as well as AI impact to the tourism context. So tourism is actually a human nature, and human instinct business, and now integrating with technology, integrating with methodology. So like a business, the department of business, they are pretty much functional, pretty much a very narrow scope of their own department base. But tourism and ours is a pretty wide, and that's why it's so impactful insight citation fact. So I want to hear from you your policy and the direction for the journals and for our researchers.
Yeah, so I think that ANAS has a little bit of a different positioning than any other journal, because if you look at Journal of Sustainable Tourism, it's about sustainable tourism. If you look at Journal of Travel Research, it's traditionally an empirical marketing journal. It's only recently emphasizing theory, but it's clearly in the destination marketing space. or marketing generally, tourism marketing. Tourism management is traditionally in the management space. Whereas Annals of Tourism Research covers everything from anthropology to econometrics, like literally. And we have a unique, so in many ways, it reflects exactly what you described. It reflects that the phenomenon of tourism is not bound to a discipline, but it crosses disciplinary boundaries. So we will have, we will have purely anthropologic studies published and highly quantitative econometric studies. So everything is okay, right? As long as it significantly contributes to knowledge. And I would say it's the latter where most people fall. So I don't remember, well, never have we rejected a paper for the pure reason of why someone chose a certain method. We will frequently reject the paper because the method is not used correctly or the wrong method is used. But we don't care what. You need to use the correct methods for what you're trying to answer your research question, right? But we have a really, the beauty of Annals is we are fortunate to have a marvelous team of associate editors. So we have 50 associate editors. That's gigantic, right? Most journals have 2 or 3. But the reason we have 50 is because we need that expertise, right? So even economics is beyond my expertise. If I get an economics paper, I have probably 5 economics people in my associate editor team that I can assign it to. If I get I have probably 3 people I can send survey experiments to. So then we have anthropologists, we have high-end qualitative experts. So that allows us to direct the manuscript in the right way. So yes, no, we are totally agnostic to the method. We are agnostic to the discipline. We welcome all of, in fact, we get really excited when we get submissions from non-tourism researchers. So people who are usually within their discipline, and they bring us something that they've done in the tourism space. That's really exciting for us. But yeah, I mean, don't forget, the desk rejection rate is 75%. And that's not because we have no limitations. So our journal does not have a page limit. Yeah, we can technically publish every single paper that's submitted. The reason it's 75%, we're not proud of that. We would much rather have 100% acceptance rate. But the rejection rate is so high because the papers we get are so poor. That's just the brutal truth of it. And sadly, over the last 6 years, during my tenure as the co-editor-in-chief, they've only gotten worse. So when we started, we had about 60% desk rejection. Now we're at 75. And the manuscripts are getting worse by the month. It's really quite heartbreaking. Because as you know by now, I'm an idealist, right? So I want tourism research to be brilliant. I want, over the lifetime of my tenure as editor, I want to see improvement. And I'm sitting there and witnessing deterioration. It's really quite sad.
Great. Anyway, I published the 2 papers last year.
Well done. Good work. Very unusual. Very, very
Very
cool.
unusual.
Yeah.
Very unusual. Very unusual. Anyway, so proud of myself.
You should be. That's wonderful. Wonderful.
But I rejected 100 times before.
Yeah. I think that's another thing. People, I find, frankly, that my best studies are now almost impossible to publish. I study, the harder it is to publish. And the reason is that we have more and more incompetent editors who are too scared to publish something that is crazy. Whereas if I get something crazy, I will usually send crazy, I mean totally out of the box. I will usually, unless it's flawed, I will pass it on to an associate editor. And I will actually say, look, this is really something completely different. So can you please not let the review system break it? Because that's what happens. The review system breaks it because every reviewer is conservative, right? So, that's just the reality of it. But the beauty is you've got the power now because you can upload your papers to open access servers. And sooner or later, I'm hoping it'll make journals unnecessary and the best ideas win. That would be lovely.
Okay. Students, have any questions? It's a great chance to you talk to.
Everyone's
Sara
shy.
directly.
Come on, ask me. Mentoring questions, publication questions. You've got 8 more minutes.
Hen, it's your time.
Your
Go ahead.
time. We can't hear you. Is that
Okay?
Yeah. No. Actually, I'm not.
Oh, okay. I see,
My
understand.
yeah, my major is design. So some part of the lecture is understandable, but some part of the lecture is not really understandable. So always I listen again the lecture because of the sometimes the research process is different with the design.
What is
So
your major?
digital content design. So I'm studying user experience, and so I think I understand the waste of the waste reducing like waste and this kind of thing. But sometimes I don't know how to ask the question.
well, I'll answer a question you didn't ask, okay? How about that?
Okay.
The digital design, the study with the seniors on the web page for pensioners, that is digital design. So your digital design nudges. So it is a really fantastic space to be in because most booking decisions happen online. So the way
yes.
you present stuff online affects decision making. Yeah. So
Yeah.
you are the nudger. You are the master nudger. Depending on how you present stuff to people, they will make one or the other decision. Yeah. For example, if you look at, I'll give you an example. I don't know if we ever published it, but we were working on carbon offsetting. So if you book an online flight, how the carbon offsetting option is shown makes a huge difference to how many people click it. Yeah. And that's all online design. Yeah. So you have a really powerful tool to create change.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, I'm really interested in tourism as well because the UX design also related to tourism and actually everything related to visual experience. So I'm really interested in, but just when I focus on tourism, it's difficult to capture the issue to anyway thank you for your
I'm glad to hear you like tourism. You should really do work in tourism because I think there is almost no other industry that is so dependent on internet as tourism. Everything online. I mean, how we behave at the hotel is a different story. But all the main decisions, where do I go? How long do I go? In which hotel do I stay? How do I get there? All happens on screen.
Okay.
Thank
okay.
You.
Any questions from student side? If not, I have one question for Sara Dolnicar. You know, you're the top journal editors. As you may know, I just launched the new Journal of Smart Tourism, which is 3 years now. As a top journal editors, could you advise me to doing the new journal management and guidance?
I don't think I can. The reason I can't is because I have never gamed the system, and I'm very proud of that. So usually the new journals feel under pressure to improve their impact factor. I have never done that because I just think it's totally wrong. So Scott and I, we're co-editors of Annals. We are, of course, we're not going to lie. If we have a good impact factor, we're happy. But we have never, ever made a strategic decision or a manuscript acceptance decision to push our impact factor. We've never done that. And in many ways, I'm so surprised that we didn't just drop off because it's quite obvious what you have to do to game the impact factor. And a lot of journals are doing it excessively. and we've refused. So what we should have seen is a real drop. But you know, maybe there's hope. Maybe people appreciate. We just judge every manuscript on its merit, and then decide whether we publish it or not. I know that's not what you're looking for, but really that's all we do, you know. If anything, what the other things we do, which we're proud of, is the video abstracts. I think that's been a real game changer because we are bringing knowledge to more people, especially those who are cut out because they can't pay fees for libraries to have annals. So I'm really proud of that initiative. I'm really proud of our curated collections. I think they've become real bodies of work. So it's maybe more the strategic initiatives where you could ask yourself, where could the smart tourism thing have a really unique positioning? But in terms of the journal, just publish high quality work.
Yeah.
Thank
you.
Oh, we have
one last question from Aziza.
Yeah, the last question. Thank you. Can you give me the specific best practices or kind of case studies from other regions? I'm personally from Uzbekistan, which is considered a developing country, so that Uzbekistan could learn from when it comes to integrating sustainability into its tourism development plans, let's say.
No, I don't.
So no, okay.
No, because I mean, the thing is, it's not, to be honest, there is no destination that has done this properly, right? So there's no best practice example I can give you. And if you look at what we discussed today, they're independent of, they're like gravity, right? It's not destination dependent. So all of these things could be implemented in every destination, but nobody does it. So yeah, sadly, I have to say, there's cases of destinations putting in place individual initiatives that have been interesting, right? Like Ljubljana has a little electric train that drives tourists around the city center. So there's case studies of little examples, but really there is no case study of an entire destination that has rolled out a really committed sustainability plan.
Okay, time is almost done.
Thank you.
And Professor Sara Dolnicar, would you please a good piece of advice for our future generation, master degree students and PhD students, as a senior professor?
So are most of you interested in staying in academia? Are you staying in academia or what?
They will get a job in the outside of the academia and industry and academia or whatever.
Yeah. Well, for the ones to go to industry, find yourself a job you love and try to create change. Otherwise, you're going to be unhappy and bored all your life. For those who stay in academia, don't let the system crush you, right? The system has gone crazy. They want to judge you by an age index. They want to judge you by the number of papers. That's not good for your development. You've got to know what you want to, you've got to be curious and passionate about what you believe is right and not play games. Do you know the case of the recent Nobel Prize winner, Karina Kalinko, who got the Nobel Prize for the COVID vaccine? So she was demoted by Penn State.
Yes.
Because she couldn't get her work published. She couldn't get any grant money.
I heard that.
She stuck to it. She said, what I have here is a brilliant idea. And it saved millions of people, and it's got her a Nobel Prize. Yes. So you've got to stick to your guns. You've got to find something that's exciting to you, and then you need to do the best possible uncompromising work and not do mediocre work for the sake of another paper and another citation.
Okay. Wow, this is a really inspiring speech. I'm impressive. I'm impressed thoroughly and heartily. Thank you very much, Professor Sara Dolnicar. Thank you for your time for our student and our class and Kyung University as well. And keep in touch. And sooner or later, we'll invite you again, July 9th. I look forward to seeing you.
That's right. Again. That's right. Wonderful. Well, thank you. It was lovely to see you.
Thank you very much.
And all the best. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.